All right. So, well, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to have Reverend Cynthia Davidson with us tonight, who's the head of the executive director of Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light. She is a Unitarian Universalist minister, a GreenFaith Fellow, and a board member of the Unitarian Universalist Ministry for Earth. She believes in the restorative power of nature and in the creative potential of people of faith working together within and beyond their congregations for environmental and climate justice. So the work that you do with IP&L is really dovetails with what we're doing, trying to educate people about how they can electrify their buildings, how the incentives work, which are all very complicated, but you bring this added bit of spiritual nurture and supportiveness that I think is really we all need. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Cindy, and I will share my screen. So can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can't hear.
No, we see this meeting is being recorded.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, let me try.
I'm seeing your screen.
Let me share again. Let me try again. Like
I could see your screen.
Okay. All right. So, that might just be that might be just because I turned the recording on, and maybe if you click
all you
on
have
it,
to do
it'll
is say
go away.
say okay and it'll go away.
Oh, okay, I got it.
All right. So do you see an introduction to the Mass IPL?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well then, Cindy,
I can see that.
You're welcome. The floor is yours, Cindy.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the warm welcome and the opportunity to meet with you briefly this evening. I apologize for the formatting here. You're going to be able to look ahead to see what's coming up with the slide, but I wanted to give you an introduction to who we are and what we do and some of the resources we have available, and then open up the floor for questions. So, Linda, can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
Thanks. We have a tagline that we call Pray, Act, Mobilize. Sort of the way we organize our thinking about our programs, our communications, our website. And those are the way we approach the topic of environmentalism and climate justice and environmental justice from a faith perspective. Next slide. We are an independent nonprofit of over 20 years, and we are supported by membership, congregational memberships. And we are one of many chapters of the National Interfaith Power and Light Network, which is based in California. That's where it started, and then affiliates grew and became affiliated. So all of us do this work of putting faith into action for climate justice. And the unifying thing is, no matter what your faith or no faith, if you are of that persuasion, we are bound by a common concern for creation and taking care of this earth, as people mentioned, for future generations. Next slide. I'm sure you've all seen this. This is one of our guiding documents, you could say, even more so than ancient scriptures and wisdom text. So we have this decarbonization map. We're really fortunate to be in a state that has done this kind of work and thinking. Next slide. We know we need to bring the emissions down, dramatically. Next slide. Right. So the current thinking is that we need to reduce our emissions by 85% and offset the other 15%. Those numbers might be changing a little. I haven't looked yet. So if you're really on top of all those number crunching, this might feel a little off, but this is what was said in that document. Next slide. So what we're focusing on is really the decarbonization, getting off of fossil fuels, whether it's through energy efficiency or electrification, using clean energy, using renewable energy. So these are the things that we try to help congregations or any faith-based organization that has a building. We help them with that. So there are about 3,000 faith-based organizations. Sorry, let me take that back. There are about 3,000 buildings that belong to faith-based organizations in the state. About 2,500 of those are actual houses of worship with sanctuaries. And then the rest are things like parsonages and community buildings and office buildings, things of that nature. So there's a lot of buildings out there. And we've estimated that the carbon footprint of the commercial sector that is specifically faith-based is a little under 3% of the carbon emissions from the burning of oil and gas. So it's a notable amount, and every bit helped in reducing. Next slide. So I don't know how many of you have followed the news of Pope Francis releasing this newer work, Laudato Deum, his sequel to Laudato Si. But I lift this quote off because this is where we work, at the intersection of faith and climate, or faith and the environment. And yet it's our common humanity, and for many people, their beliefs and their tenets of faith that give us the motivation and the orientation and the will and the courage to do this work, even when we know that it's going to be substantial changes that take time, that may take more resources than we have at the moment, etc. So that's okay. So let me tell you a little about how we do this, and you can go down to the next slide. Thank you so much, Linda. You're doing great. So like I said, we organize our things around pray, act, and mobilize. So we do guest speaking and preaching. Some of our folks on our executive committee are the sort of the energy audit experts, so they can speak about those technical things. I'm more the pulpit, the religious expert. So we blend them, and we can show up in your community in a church service, or in a community event, or an educational event, or panel discussions, whatever. We have tried to do an annual interfaith service. This year we're out of sync a little. We'll be doing it in the spring instead of the fall. We have a monthly newsletter where we share opportunities. So when we hear that the Episcopal Diocese is doing XYZ, or this group is doing this, or this group is doing that, we publicize those things as much as we can. And we also have some online resources that are rather general in nature, and they're not the most up to date, to be honest at this moment. So we do have that available. Next slide. What we're most known for is this. It's the education around specific things, around solar, around heat pumps, around how congregations can get to net zero. So with the advent of the pandemic, we've done more online webinars and then captured the recordings, things like that. We used to offer what we call the Sustainable House of Worship show. It would be like a half-a-day educational event in person at a congregation somewhere. And we probably will resume doing that, but for the moment, we are sticking with online things because they are so accessible. The other thing is that we do have resources online in this area about what you can do and what you can learn just by going online about how to lower carbon emissions and energy costs. So when you go to the website, which is there's a drop-down menu across the top. It will say pray, act, mobilize. And if you click on the act drop-down menu, you get these choices. Next slide. So I apologize, this might not be the easiest to read. This is a screenshot from the website. Okay, but I just wanted you to know what's there if you want to go check it out. So under the everyday environmental stewardship things, we have some resources. The things that are underlined are links. If you click on them, it will take you to what it's talking about. So there is a sort of a worksheet with questions about how you use your building and when it's used and all those kinds of things that factor into making a good energy plan for your facilities. Then there's a spreadsheet, the utility use and cost spreadsheet that helps you track and understand what you're already paying for energy. There's you see the next one there is about budgeting for the future and budgeting and taking a saving from whatever energy efficiencies you are doing and rolling them forward into the next thing that you'll do. That's sort of a new thing. And if you scroll down that, if you can zoom back out a little, yeah, that's good. There are different kinds of resources there. And if you go to the next slide, thank you. These are technical briefs. So everything you wanted to know about all of these kinds of things and boilers and furnaces, on-demand hot waters, heat pumps, etc. So these are written and posted by the gentlemen on our executive committee who actually do the energy audits, and they've been doing this work for a long time. One is certified in residential energy audits, and the other is a retired mechanical engineer. So they know their things. And also, if you have a question that you don't find an answer to, you can email us info@massipl and it will get to the right person and you will get a very long email response and more resources. But so we're there to be helpful in that way. Next slide, please. Yeah, so you see, all right. One thing we don't have here is carbon pricing. Okay, we know that's been a somewhat controversial in some circles, and it, so you see we don't have an article, an item there, but we do for people elsewhere. Okay, next slide. The other thing we're really known for is what we call our environmental stewardship assessments. They are basically much more comprehensive energy audits than you will get from Mass Save. You need to understand that when Mass Save comes to a church building, for instance, which is what we're talking about most of the time, their lens is what they're looking at everything through the lens of what incentives will this place qualify for, not how can we get them, how can we improve things and reduce the energy cost the most. So they're coming with that perspective. What Mass IPL does is the deeper, more holistic, broader assessment. And if you go down a little bit, we do ask for a fee, but I don't believe we've ever turned anyone away from a very small congregation that couldn't afford these fees. So we do it on a sliding scale. And what happens then is the gentlemen on our executive committee come to the building and they do the walkthrough, they take all the photos, they take the measurements, or,
Wow.
the heat at the windows and the doors and everything. They also there is some preparation required. They work with the information that you provide about your energy usage and utility bills and things like that. So it's a very good comprehensive place or report, and it's come to you via email these days, and it's a pretty substantial report with recommendations. They also are willing and often meet with the decision makers in a congregation, so if that's the building committee or the board, to answer questions and to discuss their different recommendations. Very often the recommendations may be too much for somebody to do all at once. So then there are discussions about, well, where should you focus first, and how do you prioritize, and how do you phase in your improvements? So it's a very, very valuable resource, very well appreciated by people who go through the process. I am told, and I've just been with Mass IPL for a little under 2 years, I am told that the congregations that go through this reduce their energy use and expenses by 50% or more. So it does make a difference. Next slide. Thank you. Whoops.
Let me get the right size here. There you go.
Yeah, and so actually online too, then there are also little success stories that have been written up about what other congregations have experienced and what they've done and, you know, the result. Next slide. This is I don't know if you can reduce that a little.
Yeah, I'll just, sorry, I
Zoom out.
don't mean to be fiddling
Yeah,
with this.
no. We have a vision that we I've heard the vision said that we want to see solar panels on the roof of every house of worship in the state. That's a lofty vision. So we have been grappling with the issue of equity and bringing clean energy to under-resourced, underserved communities, often the most impacted by the effects of climate change too. So right now we are doing a model project, and we got a grant from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center to do this, working with one particular congregation that has a lot of sort of barriers to, you know, things that get in the way of being able to insulate or being able to go to heat pumps. So there's structural things. So we're in the process of working on this, and we're hoping the idea is that we use this as a role model that inspires others to do the same, and then, you know, we help just keep rolling it out and having a larger and larger impact. Next slide. So then the last segment is our mobilizing, and this is where we talk about legislative change, systemic change. Could be at the state house, could be at the federal level, could be in your local town, right? It could actually even be in your congregation, just getting started to then branch out and work with other congregations. So we are a member of the Mass Power Forward Coalition, which has its legislative priorities, and I'm sure you know about them. So I go to those meetings and we sign on to different appeals and petitions and things of that nature, and testify when we can. And also at the federal level, the Interfaith Power and Light National Network does have 1 or 2 lobby days a year, and leaders of the state affiliates participate in that. So I was pleased to do that last spring, and met with aides from Senator Markey and Senator Warren's office, and Representative Clark and Representative Presley's office. So, you know, there's a lot of work that can be done. The last item here, I just want to talk about a little bit. We piloted a project last year that we abbreviated FAN, for Faith Action Network for Climate and Environmental Justice. And the idea was to organize and train and mobilize people who were in different congregations in a congressional area, right? So that they could collaborate and work together to lobby and advocate their particular legislators. And the focus was on being very strategic, like so-and-so is on such and such committee and needs to move this through. Now, where are those towns, where are those churches? We did have some success with it, mainly because there was already a pre-existing group in Worcester, an already pre-existing interfaith group of climate activists. So we were able to work with them and strengthen their work, and they've been doing very, very good things. But right now, this project is a bit on hiatus. We had explored the possibility of trying to do the same thing on the South Shore and the North Shore and the western part of the state. And we simply didn't have the capacity or the funding to develop these networks. So just want you to know that idea is out there. And if you're a volunteer that wants to help, let us know. So I'm not really quite sure what's going to happen with that, but I think that the model was pretty sound of trying to organize around particular representatives at the state level. Next, please. I'm talking fast because I want to leave a lot of time for you. And I just want it to be an introduction. So we do have a monthly newsletter, as I mentioned, that shares information and, gives you information about what other people are doing and that kind of thing. Feel free to email me at any time if you have a question. There's my phone number as well. And that's our mailing address. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can scan that code or you can go online to where it said join us. So we really try to keep our newsletter to just the monthly mailing. And then whenever we roll out a special program, like when we had that event a couple weeks ago on panel discussion, we'll roll out a dedicated email to let people know and get them to sign up. And then, of course, like most nonprofits, we send a few targeted emails in December, hoping that people will contribute to support our mission and work. So with that said, that is an introduction. I'm happy to take questions. I realized I skipped over something rather quickly.
Dan,
Yes, Cynthia. I was wondering if it's redundant if we have an IPL assessment as well as a mass save assessment.
I
Since
don't
the mass
know.
save one is free.
Yeah, the math save one is free though. The math IPL one will probably be more useful in terms of long-term planning.
Oh.
And depending on who you get from math save, it may be smooth sailing or it may not be. And our president, who's one of these gentlemen that does the audits, has well-established relationships with agents at Mass Save, and he's often advocating and troubleshooting for people. The other thing is that when they do the assessment, when Mass IPO does the assessment, they will provide you with exactly what questions, information and questions that you should talk to the Mass Save auditor about, right? So they equip you to get the most out of the Mass Save assessment and suggestions.
Okay, so IPL
And
first,
help
and mass
make it
save.
happen.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
IPL first, and then mass save.
That's what I would suggest if you can. If you've already had their Mass Save in the works, I would,
Yeah,
And-
no, we don't, so.
and the mass save audit is required in order to be eligible for the financial incentives. So regardless of how useful it is, I mean, it depends to some extent on who you get for an inspector. And also they do have a more narrow view. They're looking at installation, they're looking at just specific things. But yeah, it is.
And so church buildings are eligible for the incentives.
there are, I forget exactly how it goes. There are, so most church buildings are classified as small commercial. And there are some funding programs that are geared for nonprofits, whether they are 501c3 or not. So I'm sorry, I'm just blanking because it's not my area of expertise. But yes, you're correct. There may be some things that congregation church buildings will not qualify for, but there also may be workarounds. So if you have a specific question like, can we get an XYZ? Send me an email and I'll send it to Jim and you'll get the right answer with no confusion.
Thank you.
Right.
That's really important to be able to get a correct answer from somebody who really knows what they're talking about. I worked with a small nonprofit in Plymouth. We're still waiting to get our funding, but to look at what we can do in their building to replace the furnaces. And it was not always easy to get somebody to give you a definitive answer because we're a nonprofit. We're not a faith organization, but we have a lot of the same issues that nonprofits have. There's no real website on Mass Save for nonprofits. We're just categorized as small businesses.
Yeah, and then sometimes Oh, in some places, or maybe it's with National Grid, I forget which it is, but, or sometimes congregations are on residential energy plans, sometimes they're on commercial energy plans. It's odd, so there's some peculiarities to deal with.
Hmm. Is anyone here from the Cape, the Faith Community Network on Cape Cod? I did invite Susan Starkey, who leads up that group. So I assume she'll probably watch this on a recording, but they have been doing somewhat similar things on a smaller scale than what Mass IP&L have been doing. They have been trying to train people in congregations and have, education components for their members.
Yeah. I see Millie has her hand up.
Oh, Millie, yes, thank you.
Yes, you mentioned when you were going through the actions that carbon pricing wasn't on there and that it was somewhat controversial in certain circles. Can you say a little bit more about that? And then I may have another follow-up question.
Yeah, so I'm really speaking as myself when I say that. It's not a position of Mass IPO, but I was on the board of the UU ministry for many years, and this will come up quite often, right? And we had quite a few conversations with people like yourselves that were in citizen climate lobby groups around the country. I think the biggest I actually don't, I haven't stayed abreast of it in a couple of years. So I think that my own personal take on it is, well, yes, it would be great if we could have a price on carbon. How are we going to enforce it, and how are we going to make that happen quickly? And I think for many people that I've talked with, one of the big concerns is, what can I do more practically right now? There's the long range vision versus the I've got to do something right now. That's not, okay. So
Yeah.
that's just, I would be interested to hear what you're all thinking about, your strategy and all.
Is that within the scope of tonight, or would that be a conversation for later? That question's for both you and Linda.
Oh, yes, I think it's worth.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts about it, Millie?
I have a lot of thoughts about it. So one thing that comes to mind that I think is a helpful tool to explain to people the effectiveness of a tool such as carbon pricing is the En-ROADS program, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. A couple of the other features of it that I think are very desirable is that it is sensitive to the climate justice stage. And it's about returning that money to citizens so that, they're not experiencing a hardship. And I also think that there are so many resources that you have on the website, clips that you just showed us, that for anyone who wanted to explore it, my question would be, would you consider putting a link on there to a fact sheet or to the En-ROADS tool itself to allow people to check that out a little bit deeper?
I could talk with the executive committee about that. I am not the person who designed the website or the content of the website. And from time to time we get requests from outside groups and we decide what to do with those requests. So I would definitely put it on my list here. Yeah.
Cynthia, I have a specific question about solar energy. You're aware that the Massachusetts legislature have the two bills to mandatory solar installations. Is IPL involved in it?
I'm not sure exactly what